It's out with the old and in with the new in the other half of Manchester as United unveil their ambitious plans to build an iconic 100,000-seater stadium costing around £2 billion. Minority owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe declared it will be the greatest stadium in the world, and the wider regeneration of the Trafford area. He's really sold it there, hasn't he? That will be accompanying it, that Trafford area. It's set to be the biggest project since the Stratford transformation for London 2012. It's not just the club that are optimistic about the project, with Chancellor Rachel Reeves and the UK government backing the proposal, even recently stating that they're keen to crack on. The club had previously stated that the new ground and surrounding attractions would end up contributing £7.3 billion per year to the UK economy. However, the new stadium announcement has come amidst a lot of bad press for Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos, with seemingly endless cuts right down to what's being served in the canteen, a constant source of frustration for the United faithful. Question marks have also been blown up with regards to the structure of the club's hierarchy. Sir Jim Ratcliffe admitted that mistakes were made with the acquisition of sporting director Dan Ashworth, who left his position after just 5 months, as well as the contract extension given to Eric Ten Hag before his eventual sacking. Jamie Jackson, the best stadium in the world. All sounds very exciting, doesn't it? Can you give us any kind of timeline on this, though?
Well, we have a whip round now that will start off the sort of timeline.
Just Stefan's fee will sort that, won't you?
Just with regard to the sort of... I mean, they're saying £2 billion, but I'd be surprised if it comes in at any less than 3.5/4 billion. I mean, it's just going to balloon. These costs always do. Yeah, I mean, with regard to the funding being serious, talking to sort of local government quite recently, that they are saying, sort of off the record to me, you know, sort of, however you want to characterise it, that there's a long way off anything material being in the pipeline with regard to funding. I mean, the funding's an interesting one because, you know, they're in a lot of debt, as we know. I think it's 750 plus 300 in transfers that they owe. There's £1 billion there. I don't know, it's interesting. It's interesting that the government are keen on it. I just wonder whether the government are keen on it because it's sort of something in the north, so for them politically, you know, so for example, it could have been in Newcastle, it could have been in Liverpool, you understand what I'm getting at? And levelling up, however you want to call it. So it's all a little bit... You know, when I talk to sort of, let's say, you know, the sort of people who have the power there, they have this sort of 2-year timeline with regard to... where they think they can start to compete again in the transfer market, yes. Then the year after that is the Project 27 thing with, you know, we're going to challenge for a 21st title, you know, the 150th anniversary. This is obviously a 5, well, they're saying 10, but it could be reduced to 5-year project with regard to the stadium. I don't know, I mean, if it works, great, but it's such a... I'm reluctant to use the word mess at that club, but, you know someone getting at it, it's a little bit of a sort of chaotic, let's say, at the moment. Now, maybe this is the calmest point, so the darkest point before the sort of dawn, if you understand what I mean, what we're talking about here. But in all my years reporting on United, which goes back to the Aguero title-winning season, yeah, Mancini, this is, you know, and it's a crowded field, a crowded market. This is obviously the most turbulent kind of period. So, you know, I was talking to someone yesterday who sort of, let's say, works at the club, and, you know, listen, it's only one person reflecting on people's views, so it won't be concrete, but it's not a particularly happy place, as you can imagine, people losing their jobs, there's a consultation process with his latest redundancies, and there is a view that Ratcliffe has got a lot of chutzpah, but he might not necessarily be the biggest expert in football matters.
Yeah, you mentioned the Aguero moment there. It raised a little smile from...
well, of course
Stefan.
It would do.
Yeah,
Mr. Partisan here, to my right.
But Stefan...
It's always objective.
It's interesting, isn't it, on this, the funding issue, because, you know, Sir Jim Ratcliffe came out with those wide-ranging interviews. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail in just a moment. Yeah. But, you know, at one point he was saying that the club would have gone bust had they not made certain cuts to the staff, etc. And then the next day he's announcing plans for this new £2 billion stadium. I mean, you can see why that looks a bit strange for the eyes watching on from the world. Why do you think he did that? Is there anything to do with the funding as to why he made that decision?
Well, look, the funding they've dodged completely. So what they say is it's too early. And I think it's true that it is too early. I think from what I can gather, the launch process, and remember, we're talking about a CGI and a model, and not a lot else, was as much to do with getting momentum into the process, particularly with central and local government, as it was to do with the actual build of the stadium. And I wouldn't criticise that at all. I think if you're trying to drive a difficult project, and I think this is a difficult project, there are almost no stadia in the world with 100,000 seats, right? There's a reason why there tends to be a limit to the number of seats that people put in, and it tends to be because it's not economic to do so. This is an enormous project in terms of scale, £2 billion of estimate right now, which, you know, as Jamie says, by the time you've got a few years of inflation in there and you've got the debt cost and everything else is going to be a lot more than 2 billion probably, the existing debt. So there's good reason to get some momentum into the process just to get it moving. I think underlying it in terms of them having a very positive forward picture, you have to remember that despite Ratcliffe trying to make out as though United are in some kind of financial crisis, the reality is that on the other side of their announcements, their public announcements, first of all, they're confirming that they have no issue with paying their bills as they become due over the next 12 months. And they confirmed that in an announcement in early February to the New York Stock Exchange. So you can forget this idea that they were somehow running out of cash. Secondly, they have a whole load of people around the table who, in the worst case scenario, could find cash to put into the club to pay the bills. Now, the third thing, and this is one thing that's sort of missed by a lot of people, is United's own announcements say that this year will be one of the most profitable years that they've had in the last 6 years. So they're talking about guiding the market, and that's guidance that you give to stock market investors about a conservative estimate to how you think you may perform. Their performance, they have guided, will be around about £160 million of EBITDA. Now, you might say that that measure is not a good measure in a football club because it's before a whole load of costs that United have, such as all of the player amortisation, and they've got huge player amortisation because of years and years of failed transfers. They've got big interest costs that we know about from Glazers. But the bottom line here is that United are still arguably the most profitable club in the world. So for all Ratcliffe's sob story about financial performance, this is a club that has generated profits for almost every year since the Glazers have been involved. I'm not saying they've done a good job, but I am saying that it is a machine, and United will continue to be successfully financially, regardless of any sob story that Ratcliffe gives. Now, that does not mean that they can therefore fund a £3 billion, £2 billion stadium project. That is a project that, on the face of it, looks very, very difficult to fund for Manchester United as we sit here today.
Jamie, just going back to the point you made about the club, for want of a better word, being a mess at the moment. You know, you don't want to put all of the blame on Ineos because there were problems before they arrived. Of course there were. But with the mistakes that they've made so far, and that's Sir Jim Ratcliffe's words, not mine.
Yeah, sure.
Should there be any fear amongst Manchester United fans that it will be them that are driving this project forward?
Well, I think a little bit of fear. Just, I mean, all I'd say is they have now, or Ratcliffe has now turned around and said, yeah, look, yeah, it's a fair cop. We made mistakes over Ten Hag and Ashworth, because both decisions, particularly Ashworth for me, was farcical. But I mean, you can make a case for Ten Hag as well. So, and the reason why I think that's important is because that says to me, at least I try to read the room. At least he has got it in him to say, like, I'm sorry. I think he actually did say I'm sorry, and that's almost, you know, you're allowed to make mistakes.
But I mean, this is well, the biggest project since 1910.
What I was going to go on to say is I think this is actually probably more up Ratcliffe's street to do with football decisions. Because, you know, the reason Ashworth left was because, as it's told to me, he could never have got on with Ashworth, I was told, yeah? So, I don't know. That's, in terms of macro business, listen, I'm not a massive expert on Ratcliffe and you know, what he's done in the past, but I just feel something of this scale, I don't know, there's a lot of sort of checks and balances for it to go completely and utterly what's it up, if you understand what I'm getting at. But I don't know, the way in which they've come in, I have been surprised at the sort of PR. I know I've just said he's apologised, but you almost wonder whether, you know, that was for optics because, you know, all the debt they're in, the losses that they're announcing, the fact that the product on the pitch isn't great, or it's got slightly better, and I'm talking like minuscule, but, you know, it's a very sort of small bar. So, yeah, let's wait and see. what I picked up from the sort of launch in London of the stadium was they kept on talking about there's no way this could be done without sort of local money or government money. And I just thought, I get why they say that or why they think they can say that because it's all about the infrastructure and the good of the community, etc., etc. But if you're another football club, you might be thinking, well, what about our football club? We could do a new stadium. I'm sure that would also regenerate because, natural. It's very difficult. You're never going to really build a stadium in a vacuum that does not have any benefits to the local community. So to a certain extent, it's an easy thing to sort of like, you know what I mean? It's an easy goal sort of thing.
Yeah.
There is a case, you look at Old Trafford, listen, it needs a revamp, but they could probably revamp that and it'd look amazing. You know what I mean? Because it is a historical stadium, all the rest of stuff attached to that. So then you get into the realms of, do they actually need to do this? And I always say, if you don't know the answer to something in life, it's money. And if you do know the answer to something, it's money. So I just see, and it's interesting what Stefan was saying then, because Woodward basically said it, the famous quote, we could not win anything for 20 years, we'll still make loads of money. In essence, he said once, Woodward, the former vice chairman. And what Stefan's saying there, that's why Ratcliffe's in there, to make money. There's nothing wrong with that, he's a businessman, but that's why he's there. He's not there for the good of the community or necessarily, or to be altruistic. Who is in business, I get that, it's nothing against him.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to what you're saying about the honesty. I think you've seen in Ratcliffe a level of honesty in the way that he's spoken. I think he's spoken outside of the advice, probably. The PR advice would be, really just don't meet any of these guys. Don't tell them anything. Yeah. And yet he's gone out and he's admitted things. I think he was being honest about the things that he admitted. And I don't think it's true that he's only in it for the money. I think it's more likely that this is, at his age, this is for him what should be a fun project to spend his many hundreds of millions / billions on. And fortunately, there's plenty of spending that can go on at United for him to do so. But I think you should take him at face value. To me, he seems like he is genuinely being serious about the things that they think that they've got wrong so far. And I do think that Jamie makes a very good point, that in terms of something being in the sweet spot of Ineos and his team, a financially led infrastructure project, it's not chemicals, fine, but at the end of the day, those chemical plants are not about people. They're about buying things, bolting them together in a certain way and selling the product afterwards. And all of the components of that, be that how do you fund it, whether it's debt, what rates you get on the debt in the global financial markets, all of that, very dry stuff that I like and nobody else does. Is the stuff
why we keep getting you back, Stefan.
I know, and there'll be nobody watching, but it's fine. That's where that's in Ineos' sweet spot. But they're not magicians. At the end of the day, it's still got to have financial sense to building a project of £2 billion to £3 billion that makes a return and that makes an incremental return on what they've got, because they do have a big stadium already that's full every week with 75,000 fans. And when we go to the £7.3 billion sort of proclamation as to what this can add to the economy, the reality is it's virtually all who can we bring in from abroad? So what tourists can we bring in to sell those 25,000 extra seats, that those people are going to come in, they're going to stay overnight in Manchester and in the rest of the UK, and they're going to spend 3, 4, 5 times what a local fan spends. Can we get 25,000 of those tourists every single week? And then, we can generate billions of pounds of additional revenue for the UK. And that's what the model is. Whether it'll work or not, we don't know. But even then, I still can't see how you can fund a £2 billion stadium.
Which it could raise some worries about the atmosphere that will be at that stadium too. And just talking about that funding again and the potential sponsorship deals that you said Ratcliffe will be so kind of excited about, there has been talk about even the name of the stadium being, sold off, and potentially we'll be visiting the Snapdragon Arena. I don't know about you, Jamie. Does that feel like? I know that a lot of clubs do this, especially if they do have a new stadium. But when you're moving away from Old Trafford as well, such an iconic stadium with so many trophies and victories and amazing memories, and you're moving to somewhere that's got a sponsored name, does it feel like the club losing its soul a bit there?
Maybe I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm not a fan of the club, but it seems to me they might do something like the Snapdragon Old Trafford or Snapdragon New Trafford. So you know how was it like the Barclays Premier League and Coca-Cola, I think, or the FA Cup sponsor one in, but they still kept the actual. So I can't believe they will not do that because it's a big money spinner, and you know everything we're talking about, they need money, and you know he's a businessman and pragmatic, and it's the sort of thing I think that after a bit people forget about. Yeah, it might be used by a certain constituency of fans, which is up to them, you know. Whenever this argument antique Glazer stroke Ratcliffe comes up, oh yeah, and by the way, you know, what happened to the name Old Trafford? I get all that, but I'd be surprised. You know, if I was advising, I'd be saying, well, look, you know, I don't, you know, I think you should do it because you need money. It's a big revenue thing. But in terms of losing its soul, I mean, how do you define that? Possibly, but you know, you could sort of say football itself is pricing itself out of the kind of the sort of traditional constituency you used to sort of go a little bit. So it'd be part of that, maybe.
I just want to pick up on something that Jamie mentioned earlier as well, Stefan, about that government funding. Now, obviously, I think the idea is that it won't be the stadium itself; it will be the surrounding areas that the government will put the money into. But does he have a point about other clubs, because there is a bit of a stadium race at the moment. You know, for instance, Newcastle are talking about plans. Everton have just built their new stadium. Chelsea too. There's talk of that kind of thing. Will those clubs be a bit frustrated that it seems the government will want to back this project more?
Well, there'll be lobbying. I mean, so I think it's less about being frustrated. It's for every club to do what they need to do to get as much government and so central government and local government support as they can, and whether clubs realise it or not, that is a competitive race to get the support of your local constituents. And I'm sure that Everton are doing it right now in terms of trying to build the infrastructure around their new stadium. If they're not, they're crazy. I'm sure Newcastle are working very closely with the council. I mean, they have to be because some of the land is actually held by the council. So they'll be working closely there. Chelsea will not be able to do anything without the local residents of Kensington and Chelsea effectively either being in support or not being as objectionable as they might be. So everybody has to work with those constituencies. And I think part of the reason that United have done the soft launch that they've done is to try and, as I said before, to try and get some momentum into that process, because it's all very well saying no central government, no local government is going to build the stadium, but you can already see that there's some grey areas around the project
station,
where you know, is it government money? Is it not government money? Is it United land or is it government land? You know, there's going to be significant money spent in helping Manchester United build a £2 billion stadium, and it may be that there's good reason to do so. But you're absolutely right that every other city, and by the way, this is almost now, football stadia seem to be almost the only project, aside from a failed HS2, that anybody is suggesting that we should build. I mean, the fact that I think there's only 3 projects that are even kind of talked about by central government right now. One of them is Heathrow, which has been a long-standing project that's never happened. One of them is HS2, and one of them is Manchester United's new stadium. And that in itself is a crazy situation. So, look, we'll see. I would think all of the clubs who are looking to invest in infrastructure are having similar conversations. And there's only a certain amount of money that can go around.
By the way, it has been revealed by the Manchester Labour MP Graham Stringer that Manchester United actually rejected the chance to move into the Etihad, what is now the Etihad, for free in 2003 as well. Would have been an 80,000 seater. I don't know, Jamie, does it feel like a missed opportunity, or when you think about it, moving away from Old Trafford at that time, would that have been the right move?
It's difficult to tell because who knows what would have then have followed it if... I mean, you know, I can just sort of talk about losing its soul. You can sort of see the outcry from fans. Because Old Trafford's obviously been there since, I think it was 1910 it opened. It was obviously bombed badly in the Second World War, rebuilt all the rest of it. A heck of a lot of very good players have played on that pitch, either for the team or against that team, you know what I mean? There was a lot of... And as I understand it, it might not be the same way it's configured, but it's the same patch of grass. So, I don't know, that to me... You know, kind of going against my own argument earlier about the naming rights, that to me means something, sort of. So I wouldn't be too upset about that. I mean, the only thing is City going for a peppercorn rent, didn't they?
It's a sensible commercial in the absence of the bidders, as we know. At the end of the day, United, that conversation about United moving to the Commonwealth Stadium as it was then will have been a conversation that lasted about 2 minutes. I mean, first of all, it's actually in a different city, isn't it? It's going from, isn't it Trafford? Is Trafford its own, or Salford? So he's actually moving.
I'm not a United fan, but he knows what he's doing there. It definitely is in Manchester.
Been moving city, so I suggested that was never really.
Stefan being cheeky.
Yeah, he is.
The first time on this show.
But so. I mean, I don't think he's being serious with that suggestion that United would ever have done that. And anyway, 25 years ago, when they were having the conversation, it wasn't necessary. Old Trafford was in good shape, so.
Yeah, and now it's it's got one of the biggest waterfalls in the country. I'm joking, of course.
It's a feature.
It's a feature, that's true. Just very quickly, Jamie, as well. I mean, you were the person who reported that story about what was going on with the canteen closing down and the food changing and all these goings on behind closed doors. What's the current mood within the club in your eyes?
Good question. It's probably not particularly happy. I think there is a definite. Maybe factionalisation is too strong, but there's a definite Ineos and the rest of the club thing going on, which you're going to get in any situation, I suppose, when a new sort of broom, if I can put it that way, comes in and wants to do sort of massive changes. Speaking to a couple of people about a week ago, and they're saying the sort of one upturn of, how he ruled that everyone has to work in the offices now rather than at home. One of the upturns, or the only good thing about that is that there's a bit of camaraderie because people are together, and sort of. It's there's that story I did. The scouting department has been going to be slashed. I get that any business or a lot of businesses are kind of be, they do need sort of slimlining. But I don't know. Once this next round goes through, I think it'll be 450 have gone of 1,100. I mean, you tell me, you probably have a view on it, but that's what, a third or 40% of what was there. It's quite a massive cut, isn't it, in any business, right?
Yeah, I think when you actually break down the numbers and you compare football side and non-football side, and they talk about the numbers from about 10 years ago, and they didn't even have a women's infrastructure then, and the size of the football department was much smaller. So actually, when you do the maths, you're talking about something like 50% of the administration, media, and commercial teams will have been made redundant. So you would think that is going to have some kind of impact. On the flip side, the business reality is clearly the club has got a little bit flabby in terms of how it's been operating, and it's likely that actually on the back end of this they will create a better organisation. They will have a more dynamic set of people who are more in tune, especially if they've all gone back to the office. I suspect they will get some benefit from it. I think that what's likely to happen is that they'll have to rescale up again, because what's probably happened is they cut very deep. So they'll cut very deep. If they can qualify for the Champions League through the Europa, that will make a material difference to the next step of the rebuild. If they don't, then I think it's going to take longer. But I think at some point you'll take the hit, you'll retrench back, you'll have a core of the best people because you'll have got rid of people that you perceive to be the lower performers, and then you'll rebuild again from there. And that's a pretty, well-trodden path. It's just that obviously it's extremely painful for the people that are involved, both going out, but also the people that are left. After any retrenchment, it's a very difficult organisation to be in during that period, and it lasts a very long time as well. The damage that's done. You've lost friends, you've lost colleagues. It takes a long time to recover.
Just very quickly, because you asked me recently, or previously, I put the blame really on that of the Glazers. OK, Ratcliffe could have done it better or more, in a more charming way, however you want to say it. But he's come into this situation. He's only been there over a year, and and this is what he's found. So that's got nothing to do with them. I mean, it really hasn't. That's Glazers. It's 20 years now since Malcolm Glazer went in there. And actually, I find it quite. I'm not going to say comical, but it sounds insensitive. But I find it quite interesting that the Glazers, who have always kind of not really done much for United and seem to be all about the bottom line, have actually allowed this, to use your word, flabby operation to.
This does go to what Ratcliffe said in the interviews, and
are you related to Ratcliffe, by the way?
No, I do seem very pro Ratcliffe. I just think he was being honest in those conversations. And what I would say, I think he's been too honest, by the way. So I think he was.
Can you be too honest, Stefan?
Yes, I think it was interesting to watch for us because he told us too many of his inner thoughts. But I think from a professional perspective, he told us too many of his inner thoughts. And part of that, where I think again he was being honest, was in terms of the criticism of the Glazers. And the reality is the Glazers allowed the management team to do what they wanted to do.
He didn't criticise them, though. He said they were East Coast gentlemen.
I'm sure he went overboard, and I don't know the Glazers from Adam, but I'm sure he went overboard in his praise of his partners, and he is bound by a non-disparagement clause within his agreement. He cannot say negative things about any of them. Just so people are aware, it is in writing that he cannot criticise them for fear of breaching that contract. So he won't criticise them, but it is true that arguably the worst thing they did was gave the management team a completely free hand to build the operation, to hire who they wanted to hire, and not to interfere, certainly on the people side as opposed to the football side. So, as I say, I think Ratcliffe was being honest in that session.